Hello everyone and welcome to this Unitera hosted webinar on the Ultimate Expansion Strategy 2023. This is our first in a series of scheduled webinars for this year, which we hope to bring to our audience and will be packed full of insights and tips to assist you and your organization as you navigate through this year. Unfortunately, we do not have a magic wand to help you guys and your organization sell your products and services, but we can advise you on how to operate internationally and keep you compliant. For those of you that don't know me, I am David Wall and I'm the CEO of Unitera, and we are part of a larger group called the Payroll Software and Services Group. So just to give you an idea of our size, we roughly support about 1,300 customers globally. We payroll in the order of 1.5 million people, and we execute on £3 billion of the payments every year. I'll be chairing this webinar today, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by an individual who I've known for probably 5 years now, and I'm aware through my many interactions with him that he's incredibly passionate about his work and this sector that we work in, but also extremely knowledgeable around the development of the employer of record market, which has become a really big growth area over the last couple of years. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Nick Broughton from Go Global. Nick, how are you doing today and where are you dialing in from? It looks like you're in a sauna.
I was looking at myself in the camera there. I thought I looked like in a very nicely lighted spa, a dim room. I promise after the webinar I can nip out the back for a jacuzzi, but I'm actually calling from Switzerland. So I'm based in Switzerland. Nice.
And do you want to give the audience just a very quick overview of Go Global and its service offering? I think that would be helpful for the audience.
Sure. So Go Global is an HR talent acquisition and EOR solution provider that enables companies of all sizes and geographies to employ, onboard, manage, pay workers literally all around the world in locations where they don't have a presence or entity. We are looking after around 800 clients and we have about 2,500 workers. We've been operating since 2018 and our revenue 2022 is around 220 million.
Awesome, thank you. Thanks for just providing that brief overview, Nick. So before we launch into the conversation, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone that's taken the time to dial in today. It's a busy time of the year. There's lots of planning going on for 2023, and I can see from the people that have registered that we have people dialing in from all over the globe. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. This session will be recorded and you will have the opportunity to post questions in the channel on the platform. So please do that because we want to try and make it as interactive as possible. The only challenge we've got with that is we only plan to talk for about 25 minutes now. So we'll try and keep the questions to a minimum, but we'll also try and answer them where we can. I think given the nature of this topic, we could easily talk for 2 hours, but it's my job to keep us on track and then let you guys get on with the rest of your day. So just a few more admin points for everyone as well to be aware of. So firstly, Go Global as part of this webinar have provided a really useful guide around international expansion. So this will be downloadable at the end, and also Unitera have also done a blog on this topic, which is really around the best kind of strategies to deploy when you're going international. So we'll also make sure that that's available at the end of the session. The second point is this is our first series, as I mentioned earlier, of the year, and we'll be running sessions throughout the year. So please stay tuned because we've got some really great topics that we are going to be talking about, and got some fantastic speakers that will be joining us just like Nick. So the ultimate expansion strategy for 2023. Let's set the scene or try and provide some context to this topic. So everything we see or read about this year is tainted with negativity. I'm sure you'll agree. There's job layoffs, there's costs of living crisis everywhere, and there's obviously the war in Ukraine. These things are here to stay. How long? Who knows? We just don't know. So for decision makers in organisations like yours, how do you go about navigating through some of these challenges? And that's on top of you doing your day jobs. So, it's a really complex landscape that we're looking at the moment, and most of you will be tasked with, deploying new talent, hiring new talent, looking to open up new markets to grab new market share. So how do you do that in an ever-changing, challenging, complex world? I think now more than ever, organisations who've had aspirations to take advantage of these opportunities that going international affords, whether it be accessing new revenue or identifying talent, you need to be firstly informed, okay? There's lots and lots of risk when you go international, particularly around payroll, HR, corporate tax compliance. So it's really helpful that not only can you get insights from organizations like Uniterra and Go Global, but also get experiences from and insights from, us as providers that are working with organizations like yours every day, all day. It's probably worth spending just a quick moment reminding everybody what Uniterra does as an organization. So we primarily support organizations on their international growth journey. So we are a trusted advisor, and our core offering is international payroll and HR support. We operate in about 80 countries, and we've advised over 500 CFOs, FDs, payroll departments, and heads of people on how to set up in new countries and how to pay people. So I think as a footnote, just to bring this all together, so it's probably useful to know that, whilst Uniterra and Go Global have very similar offerings, we're not the same. We both employ international workers, and we are very complementary. But we are different, okay? And we both support aspirational businesses that grow internationally. Uniterra doesn't offer that EOR solution, but we do have lots of conversations around what that solution looks like, and we will try and advise the best route to market. And that's particularly important in today's environment. I think Go Global, and one of the reasons why we are so pleased to work with them, is they are operating in a really nascent market, which is growing quickly, and there's lots of different options available. So just before we start, I think we've got some polls, and I'd be interested to get an idea of the audience's responses to these polls. So they should come up on the screen now. So the first one is around, how are you currently employing your global workforce? And the options are direct payroll, EOR, independent contractors, or a combination of the above. So the answers are coming in now, and I'll just give that another few seconds because we've got some responses to come through. And so we've probably got about 40% that are direct payroll, slightly less number through an EOR model, and a combination of the above for the remainder. So what's the next poll? So the question is, how is the current global landscape impacting your plans for expansion? No real change, okay? Expansion is intended for now. We're slowing down to see how things evolve, or plans have been put on hold for the foreseeable. So 3 options there. We've got answers coming in. And that's great news for Uniterra and Go Global, because apart from 20% of the responses, 80% are saying there's no real change and their expansions plans are as intended. So
Wonderful.
That's good news. Well done. We're pleased with that.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think we've got one more poll. I'd be just interested to get the responses on that, and then we can dive in. Final one then. So where are your top target markets for expansion this year? North America, Europe, APAC, elsewhere. Okay, we've got the answers coming through, and predominant market looks like Europe with nearly 60%, and the 30% for APAC and elsewhere. So rest of the world is 14%. 14%. So yeah, okay. Thank you for that, everybody. Now let's turn to some questions for Nick. So Nick, obviously, you're in the EOR market. Go Global have done great over the last few years. I'm really interested to get some insights into, what you're seeing in that employer of record market and what the talent landscape is kind of looking like at the moment in 2023.
Yeah, sure. So going back to what you said earlier, I would totally agree. The employer of record space is nascent. I got into the market 7-8 years ago, and the changes have been significant since then. But it's characterized, I would say, by still relatively low awareness among senior decision makers in the HR payroll space. Adoption is increasing, there's no doubt. There's been mass publicity in the press, in marketing, from a range of companies to publicize the opportunities. And I was actually looking at a report from Valuates, which is suggesting that the compound annual growth rate of this market is expected to be 7% annual, leading towards 2028, which would then put it around a 7 billion market cap, if you looked at it that way. So significant changes to the space. And I think what I find really interesting is the use cases or the adoptions for EOR has expanded dramatically. So 5-6 years ago, it was, Nick, can we hire a sales individual in Germany? 5 out of 10 requests. The other requests are, can you support us to test another market, hire software engineers, etc. And I would say the current landscape is characterized by a number of different use cases: piloting a new product or service, testing an existing product or service, potentially looking to take advantage of managing vendors, supply chains, etc. in country. Undoubtedly, talent, retention, and acquisition, I would argue, is probably the number one driver of EOR, certainly in this market driven by remote work and work from anywhere. And we have seen a dramatic increase in companies looking to bring on individuals all around the world. And it used to be just sales and tech. And actually now we're seeing companies request information for accounting and finance roles, for designers, for executive assistants. So the pool has grown significantly. And I think very interestingly as well, and I'd be interested to get your thoughts, is EOR is a bridge solution. So we actually see a lot of companies that have done their due diligence, done their market research, and they come to us and say, we're preparing to go into X market, and we're in the process of deciding timeframes and setting up entities and going through the motions. Can you help us get people on the ground now? One example, we're working with a company in the US that wants to open a Vietnamese entity. In the interim, they're looking to bring on 25 software engineers. We're supporting them with the talent acquisition side as well, and then onboarding them in EOR workers. Simultaneously, they're setting up their entity with a view that they'll transition those workers when they're ready. That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I think that's consistent with what we're still seeing. So obviously we still get a lot of direct payroll opportunities. When you're looking at the polls and the responses, there are organisations that are putting their plans on ice for a period of time to see what's going on. But we are still seeing a lot of activity in a lot of sectors, and that is a lot of direct payroll opportunities. But to your point around bridging, we are seeing that as a conversation now, whereas 3 or 4 years ago that wasn't on the table. It was, we want to go into Vietnam, to use your example. Can Unitera support it? Yes, we can, but it would have to wait 6, 7 months, 8 months to do it. And so you're absolutely right. We your point around the flexibility of EOR and the growth in the market is a really interesting dynamic that's going on, and it does give that ability for organizations to test, pilot, and all the other things that you talked about earlier. How do you reconcile, Nick, the growth in the space, in the EOR space, with kind of the bad news stories that's coming out around, recession, you're seeing it in the news around the large corporates laying people off, et cetera, et cetera. How do you reconcile that with what you're seeing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So, undoubtedly there are economic headwinds. There are increasing interest rates. Cost of capital is increasing. There is general bad news, but you could argue that where are we at in the cycle, right? EOR enables companies to take advantage of growth. I personally don't think there's been a better time ever to source staff internationally and take advantage of global expansion because of the ease of markets like EOR, which can transition companies. So, there's sectors that have been hit, right? B2B SaaS that drove this market in 19, 20, 21, early part 2022, that really pushed a lot of workers globally. That has slowed down. I would absolutely admit that has slowed down, and it's had an effect on some of the players in this space as well. We've seen layoffs. But if we look at things such as AI or med tech, health tech, biotech, general healthcare, there's absolutely not slowed down. And I think that speaks to the overall economy, the fact that EOR companies can weather the global storm because we're working in lots of different pockets of activities. So yes, there's bad news, but actually it hasn't necessarily affected the growth of the aggregate business or our business. I think different companies are looking at EOR as a way to take advantage of expansion. And if we look at an example, people being laid off, someone in Silicon Valley, engineer laid off, wants to start a new business. Relatively easy to start businesses. He can hire an engineer in Nigeria or Vietnam for literally 1/10 of the cost of his home market and push a new business or product. And we still see there's a lot of dry powder. There's a lot of capital to be allocated with private equity companies, VC companies. So this may just be a shortened version of a slowdown. But I don't see it lasting for too long. That's our impression of the market as it stands.
So to summarize then for the audience, you have seen, that the B2B SaaS sector hit, but there are lots of sectors, particularly biotech, healthcare, AI, medtech, that there's still significant growth. And then allied to that, you've got this kind of not new phenomenon, but there is hiring patterns and access to talent, which enables organizations, to use your example of that guy who's just been released by a large corporate and decides to spin out and set himself up. He can, easily access talent through an EOR model, because very often they do that recruitment piece as well.
Yes.
Via, anywhere in the world, effectively, where they can seek those skills.
Yes, I think the message is EOR can be utilized and expansion can be utilized at any stage of the business lifecycle now. Whereas previously, I would argue that it potentially wasn't or wasn't properly understood. So that example is ideal because it utilizes and shows how companies can pivot, take advantage of new markets, new revenue streams, better for DE&I. And just going back to what I said about the adoption, previously it was startups, scale-ups, but we're seeing a lot of FTSE 250 NASDAQ companies actually utilizing the model as well. And if we look at the cost of talent, going back to that example, if they're going for a RIF or they're going for a layoff as part of their expansion plans when they're looking to gear back up again, understanding what's available in the global market, you could suggest that instead of looking in their local market in the US for a 300K developer, they can then look elsewhere. They could hire 4 or 5 individuals with amazing skill sets that can achieve more for the same cost. So that's why we believe the market has huge room to grow and expand. So
and accessibility to buyers.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm conscious of time. So I'd be interested to get your view on, not necessarily what are the negatives of EOR, but where perhaps, a direct employment model would be more appropriate, because, there are situations where, and a fair number where, a direct employment model still is probably the most appropriate. And obviously, as I touched on earlier in the conversation, we get exposed to a lot of those scenarios. So I'd be interested to get your view of where you think those are, because I've got my own views on where, potentially a direct employment relationship is probably still more preferable.
Yeah, sure. Let's bat a few things around. So I would say what we see is, depending on the strategy, depending on the company, depending on their plans, the diligence they've done, if they have very fixed plans to enter a territory and they're looking to scale up to large numbers of workers, then you would argue that pre-work would therefore mean they would enter the market sooner, right? So onto a direct payroll model. There are sometimes benefits by being in country, having an entity in country. There may be tax credits, R&D credits, for example. Because we work globally, we actually see a lot of cultural nuances with businesses as well. So I'll give you an example. We were founded in Japan, and it's a very big market for us. And interestingly, Japanese companies tend to like working with Japanese-based companies as well. So if, example, US company want to do business in Japan, Japanese companies tend to like having a partner on the ground, a business on the ground, invoicing a partner on the ground, business on the ground. So that kind of story leads to companies wanting to set up as well. So there's a range of reasons why organizations would want to dive straight into a market. And like we said, with the bridge solution, they can be agile and fast by utilizing a 3-6 month EOR while they're going through those initial searches and checks and banks and payroll and HR. And I think the beauty is, what we really like to see in this market, as these businesses in EOR become more sophisticated in the understanding of benefits, local nuances, culture, language, we can really help those organizations transition the workers to their own entity when they're ready.
Yeah.
And I think 3-4 years ago, that wasn't managed particularly well, but I see that happening consistently in our business. So tranches of 10, 15, 20 workers being transitioned over to one of our clients, making sure that the benefits are in line with expectations, and there's a very smooth transition.
Yeah, I think this is the point really of this session, right? Because historically, going international, and it is complex, and there's a lot of risk attached, and you have to understand what you're doing, and that's why us as a business, we kind of use this trusted guide, trusted advisor, and we will always try and use the right solution, and that we very often recommend an EOR solution, and it's accessible, it's easy, and it's you've articulated it pretty well. But there are situations, whether it's a cultural thing, whether it's a de-risking thing from a CFO who wants to make sure that they get through an M&A cycle and they're clean, so there's no tax assessments or whatever it is. There's a multitude of different reasons why perhaps a direct solution is the most appropriate, and I think excuse me, that's why it's been a good conversation to have with you to alert our audience, if they weren't aware already, of an EOR solution and how dynamic they are in certain situations for accessing talent and getting into markets quickly. I'm conscious of time. I'm interested to ask you a question, because I know you'll have a view on this. Is there a limit to, this is one of the questions that was posed, is there a limit on the number of EOR workers that you can put on your platform, and when should companies look to establish? Do you have a view on that?
Yeah, sure. It depends on the company, depends on what they do, depends on the strategy. We've seen companies transition to an entity from 3 workers all the way up to 30, 35, 40. So it's company dependent. It also depends what the workers are doing. So if they literally are based at home, remote working, software developers, you could argue that if that's being managed by HQ well, is there the necessity to set up? But actually, in many instances, the parent company wants to bring over a member of staff to manage that operation. So in that instance, they would set up. So going to sales, if it's sales related activities where there is potential permanent establishment triggers, if individuals are signing contracts on behalf of head office, if they are directors on paper, then that can trigger permanent establishment, and therefore you would argue that setting up an entity again would be wise at that point. Now, EOR can mitigate because there's a layer in between, but I think it comes down to the company and their aspirations. But there's not necessarily a limit, but there are cost implications, David, right? At some point, the cost of an EOR may become prohibitive versus them setting up their own entity and managing it and building for the future, right? Because they have full ownership and control. Hence, businesses like yours come into play at that point.
Yeah, or it might be a regulated environment.
Banks, trading.
Yeah, but on the specific question around how many people, the big conversation we have is around permanent establishment, and as you rightly point out, that is really an exercise that the organisation needs to undertake to see what their appetite to that risk is. I'm very conscious of time. So, and I know that when I'm on these webinars that, very often I have to drop off bang on time as well. So we could talk for a long time on this. I just want to reiterate that we, Go Global, have very helpfully provided a useful download that everybody can access. And I'm sure that will provide some useful pointers for either further conversations or follow-up. Equally, Unitera have got a link that you can access around, the differences between direct payroll and EOR. I think a big thank you to you, Nick, for your time. I appreciate it and your contribution, and we wish Go Global every success. Thank you to the audience for joining, because I appreciate, even though it's only half an hour, it's time out of your day. So thank you for your time. And if anybody would like to follow up and ask any further questions around anything we've talked about today, or anything associated with this topic, excuse me, please feel free to reach out and contact us. I'd just like to say thank you to everybody, Nick specifically, and best of luck and have a great day. Thank you very much.
I look forward to next time, David. There's much more to talk about. Thank you for inviting.
Enjoy your spa.
Well, I'm just going to go out the back door. You take care, okay? Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks to the audience.